Greetings, students of the Force, and welcome back. Today, we put together an Anakin Skywalker lore compilation video to celebrate Hayden Christensen's return to Star Wars with the finale of the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. I hope that this video will help you out if you want to drive or study. Basically, we wanted to make a longer formatted video with a lot of the lore that we've covered on Anakin for about the past 2 years. Just a quick disclaimer before we begin, this is an Anakin lore video, although of course there will be hints of Darth Vader throughout, but this is not a Darth Vader lore compilation video. We can of course put one together if you guys enjoyed this one though. Anyway, my friends, may the Force be with you and enjoy. Several days ago, we made a video on why Obi-Wan Kenobi did not have a green lightsaber, despite showing many traits of a Jedi consular, the Jedi that wielded the green lightsabers. Instead, we concluded that Obi-Wan Kenobi's lightsaber was blue because he represented the perfect embodiment of a Jedi Guardian, the protectors of the Order, and a true guardian, not a warrior. Anakin Skywalker is another individual with a blue lightsaber. However, he represents more the warrior side of the Jedi way than rather a full-fledged guardian. Unlike his master Obi-Wan, Anakin very much has dark tendencies and an affinity to use the dark side of the Force. An affinity that terrified the Jedi Council of his time, due to obviously his status as the Chosen One. Anakin Skywalker was a full-fledged warrior, the greatest warrior of the Jedi, and would oftentimes employ methods unbefitting of the Chosen One of the Order, unbefitting of any Jedi. He was one of the few knights that implemented the dark side ability of Force Cho, using it regularly as the Clone Wars progressed. Anakin was a Jedi that had clear tendencies to lean towards the dark side, despite his years of tutelage under one of the perfect Jedi Guardians. So, why is Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber blue, when in fact there is another coloration of lightsaber that would fit Skywalker's personality perfectly? The color purple. The amethyst blade. The purple lightsaber is exceptionally rare, especially among the Jedi. The amethyst blade represents an individual that holds a strong power and connection with both the light as well as the dark side of the Force, something that again is exceptionally rare among Jedi, as the Jedi teach to turn away from the dark side entirely, shunning it to the far corners of their mind. So for a Jedi to embrace the fact that they had an affinity with the dark side was so rare in fact, that only 1 to 3 Jedi at a single time or single era ever possessed the purple blade. Anakin Skywalker is an individual with a clear power in the dark side, a clear fascination with it in fact. So why is Skywalker's lightsaber not purple? The answer, honestly, has more to do with Skywalker's teachers than Skywalker himself. Anakin was obviously no ordinary Jedi. He was the Chosen One, and he would spend the majority of his life as a Jedi, attempting to become the perfect knight, the perfect moral center of the Jedi Order. Whether Skywalker liked it or not, he was the face of the Jedi Order, and was constantly under a magnifying glass. Therefore, why like other Jedi like Windu may be able to somewhat embrace their darker nature and love of a battle, Skywalker's ability to touch the dark was looked upon far more harshly and with far more scrutiny. The Jedi expected Skywalker to be perfect, and therefore Anakin put his own mental blockages within his own mind, blockages that attempted to get rid of the idea that he did in fact have a natural connection to the dark side. Unlike Mace Windu, who addressed his natural love of a fight and love of aggression, desiring to dominate his opponent, Skywalker took this same emotion but hid it deep within himself. In the far recesses of his own mind, Skywalker willed his lightsaber to be blue in coloration, just like his master, unwilling to accept within his own psyche that the amethyst blade would have fit him more closely. For Anakin to have a purple lightsaber would have been unacceptable. Again, he was the Chosen One, and this was something that Anakin knew. Anakin knew within himself that he had dark side tendencies. These tendencies, though, frightened even himself, so he pushed them deep within his mind. While Windu, on the other hand, embraced his darker tendencies, and the purple blade revealed itself. If Anakin Skywalker had been truthful with his crystal about his allegiance in the Force, truthful when he imprinted upon it, and had his teachers not been so fearful of his potential, I believe Anakin's blade would have been purple. Instead though, this was taught as something to be feared, and something that was unacceptable. And so, the blue lightsaber of Anakin Skywalker persisted. Anyway, my friends, what are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on the blue blade of Anakin Skywalker, and how in reality it likely should have been purple if he had been allowed to fully embrace his true nature? Leading into an even deeper question, what would have happened if Anakin would have never shunned his dark side tendencies and had been allowed to embrace them somewhat, learning from them, just as Windu had? As always, my friends, thank you so much for watching. May the Force be with you, and have a great day. The lightsaber is quite possibly the most famous and recognizable fictional weapon of all time. When we first saw it back in 1977 in the original Star Wars, it's captivated audiences. And to this day, we're still learning more about the legendary weapon of the Jedi and the Sith, as well as other ancient Force-based orders. In October, we're getting the official release of a brand new lightsaber encyclopedia, which will detail lightsabers from Anakin's lightsaber to the lightsabers of the High Republic era, discussing their functionality as well as behind-the-scenes details on them. Again, this book officially releases in October. However, we do have small little excerpts about certain lightsabers from the novel already, and today we will be discussing the secrets revealed about Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber. The Skywalker lightsaber is essentially the lightsaber against which all others must be measured. It is the first lightsaber seen in a Star Wars movie, was the first lightsaber prop created for 1977's Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, and has been celebrated as one of the most famous fictional creations in movie history. In a Daily Telegraph survey, Luke Skywalker's lightsaber bested a fierce field of competitors, including Robin Hood's bow and Indiana Jones' bullwhip, to claim the #1 spot as the favorite movie weapon of all time. Set decorator Roger Christian knew that he was on the brink of something special when he found the pieces for what would become Luke's lightsaber in a vintage photography shop in London. "I knew this lightsaber was the Excalibur of the film," he recalled. "I knew it would be the iconic image." In the movies, the Skywalker lightsaber passes through many hands. It is constructed by Anakin Skywalker during the Clone Wars, and used by him until he loses it on the lava planet of Mustafar. The lightsaber is kept by Obi-Wan Kenobi, who then passes it to Luke Skywalker on Tatooine. Luke later loses the weapon during his duel on Cloud City, only for Maz Kanata to become the weapon's next on-screen caretaker. Eventually, Rey claims the weapon as her own. The Skywalker lightsaber, built by Anakin, carried by Luke, and adopted by Rey, seemingly meets an explosive end in the Force struggle between Rey and Kylo Ren in The Last Jedi. But the celebrated weapon returns in Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, newly repaired and instrumental in Rey's efforts to vanquish Palpatine during the Battle of Exegol. At the close of the film, the lightsaber is given a solemn burial along with Leia's at the old Skywalker homestead of Tatooine. Actress Daisy Ridley, who portrays Rey, found the lightsaber props surprisingly difficult to manage during filming. "It is heavy even to carry, let alone swing around," she said. "They are heavier and more cumbersome than they look." A dark leather band around the middle of the repaired Skywalker saber hides the jagged break and the weld that reveals it, though scorch marks are still visible on the reverse side. The activation controls are replacements. The shattered internal crystal has been fully restored through the use of advanced Force techniques that Rey gleaned from sacred Jedi texts taken from Luke Skywalker. But that is what the novel says about the Skywalker lightsaber, both behind-the-scenes information as well as information within the Star Wars universe. If you guys would like me to discuss the other lightsabers that have been revealed so far by the novel, such as Ventress's and Windu's, hit that like button, as that will let me know you want to see more. Anyway, what are your thoughts on the Skywalker Legacy lightsaber? Where does it rank as far as your favorite lightsabers? As always, my friends, thank you so much for watching. May the Force be with you, and have a great day. Over the course of the Star Wars prequel trilogy, we slowly see the attire and robes of Anakin Skywalker growing darker and darker, something that was pretty uncommon for a Jedi, as most Jedi actually had brown or tan robes. But why was this? Why did Anakin Skywalker choose to wear this darker attire, and what did the other Jedi think of it? And ultimately, why was Anakin even allowed to wear these darker uniforms and robes? The answer is actually fairly simple, but also really interesting, as it caused a great deal of concern among the Jedi Council when Anakin decided
desired to wear these darker robes. It was in Attack of the Clones, as Anakin was a Jedi Padawan, when we first saw him adopt these darker robes. In the Ultimate Visual Guide for Star Wars, we learned that once a Jedi Padawan achieves the rank of Padawan and is no longer a Jedi Initiate, they can actually choose what they want to wear, and they have free reign over the type of their robes. Although the Jedi Council pushes a Jedi to attain robes that are either brown or tan, it is ultimately the Padawan's choice. But that is why we see various characters throughout Star Wars with different attire once they become Padawans, such as Ahsoka and Barriss Offee, just off of the top of my head. It was once Anakin Skywalker achieved the rank of a Jedi Padawan and became the official Padawan of Obi-Wan Kenobi that he adopted these darker robes. Anakin didn't really give a clear reason why he wanted the darker robes, although Obi-Wan knew that it was because Anakin desired to stand out more. Anakin Skywalker wanted to create his own identity and to stand out from the other Jedi, as in truth, Anakin never truly felt like he belonged among the Jedi Order, especially because he entered the Order at a far older age than is normal. Anakin didn't really have a lot of friends throughout the Jedi Order, and because of this, he embraced this rogue streak similar to the Jedi Qui-Gon Jinn, and also chose to express it outwardly in his attire. Anakin knew he was different and powerful, and therefore his clothes showed that. The Jedi High Council, though, were concerned that Anakin's robes were so dark, believing that there was something bothering the boy, which they were ultimately correct about, as it was confirmed that Anakin Skywalker did have an exceptionally strong affinity with the dark side of the Force specifically, and they believed that his darker robes were one of the first signs that not all may be well in the mind of Anakin Skywalker. However, because a Jedi Padawan can choose exactly what they want to wear after they achieve the rank of Padawan, the Jedi High Council had little to do with Anakin's choice. And although Obi-Wan Kenobi brought this to Anakin's attention, it did not dissuade him, as Anakin expected the Jedi Council to be concerned. Anyway though guys, that is basically all we know about Anakin Skywalker's darker robes. There's nothing in the Jedi Code or Jedi rules that say that you cannot wear dark robes as a Jedi, and Anakin adopted this as a Jedi Padawan to attempt to stand out from the rest of the Jedi, that he didn't believe he belonged with anyway, or at least was very different from. Therefore, why he chose to wear the darker robes up until the time where he ultimately fell to the dark side of the Force in Revenge of the Sith. But what are your thoughts on this, and the fact that there's actually an explanation for this in the visual guide? As always, my friends, thank you guys so much for watching. May the Force be with you, and have a great day.
The secret marriage between the Senator Padme Amidala and the chosen one Anakin Skywalker was a well-kept one. There were some that eventually discovered the secret, such as the Supreme Chancellor Palpatine, but also the apprentice to Count Dooku, the Dark Jedi Asajj Ventress, a discovery that nearly cost her her life. After Quinlan Vos seemingly betrayed the Jedi Order, he was captured and brought back to Coruscant to stand trial amongst the Jedi Council. The chosen one, Anakin Skywalker, was also called as a witness to testify against Vos. After his testimony was complete, Anakin departed the council chambers and sought out his wife, Padme, as they had agreed to meet following. Instead, Anakin was greeted by one of Padme's handmaidens, who gave the Jedi Knight a holo message from his wife. As Anakin ventured into the inner depths of Coruscant to listen to the message, in secret, the Dark Jedi Ventress began trailing him, as she had ventured to Coruscant to kill Vos, but decided to settle for the chosen one instead. As Anakin ventured into the deeper levels of Coruscant to listen to the message in private, Ventress managed to steal the holo message using the Force, and retreated to listen to it herself. Upon opening the message, Anakin's relationship was revealed, as Ventress destroyed the message in total disgust. Ventress herself became infuriated that the Star Jedi Knight, Anakin Skywalker, was not wholly faithful to the Jedi Order and its values, but she still was also filled with a sense of joy, as the seemingly invincible Anakin had revealed his weakness. Locating Skywalker yet again, Ventress attacked him, as she taunted him about Padme, telling the Jedi that she would find the Senator and make her suffer before killing her. Hearing this, Anakin was filled with rage and attacked Ventress, but was overextending himself due to his fury. Ventress commented that Anakin's blind hatred had made him a pitiful foe, and asked if Padme would put up a better fight. To add insult to injury, the Dark Jedi then retreated into a nearby abandoned building, as Skywalker closely followed. Leaping out of the darkness, Ventress again attacked Anakin, tagging him against his chin with her lightsaber. She then turned back around, and again struck Anakin across his eye, giving him his signature scar. I came to Coruscant seeking Vos, but he and Kenobi are not accessible at the moment. You, however, I can reach, and we will start with pain. Ventress then told Skywalker that the dark side of the Force was superior to the light in every way, and that Anakin was about to learn that lesson. In response, Anakin agreed and momentarily embraced the dark side of the Force, using his fury to attack Ventress and engulf himself in the hatred he would one day master as the Dark Lord Darth Vader. First I will kill the thing you love, then I will kill you. No. First, I'll kill you. Attacking Ventress without restraint or hesitation, Skywalker drove her to an edge and then telekinetically choked the Dark Jedi with the Force. Skywalker then threw Ventress into several live electrical wires as he tortured her, wrapping more wires around her body as she screamed. All of Skywalker's mercy was gone as he resolved to kill Ventress right there, as she was too dangerous to be left alive. Eventually, however, Ventress's weight broke the wires as she fell deeper into the depths of Coruscant. Anakin, instead of pursuing Ventress, opted to go back to Padme as he quickly restrained himself, realizing how close to the dark side of the Force the Chosen One had truly become. Although Ventress was severely injured by this encounter, she did, however, manage to survive. But this was the moment that Anakin, for only a brief second, fully embraced the dark side of the Force before the events of Revenge of the Sith, where Padme, yet again, would be the catalyst that pushed him to become a Dark Lord of the Sith. But what are your thoughts on this moment? And what is your favorite moment where Anakin totally lost it and embraced his darker side before becoming Darth Vader?
Order 66 saw the complete brainwashing of the clone forces and forced them to turn on the Jedi generals that they had served beside for years now, foregoing any personal connection or emotion as they executed their friends upon command. As hundreds of Jedi Knights were slaughtered within mere moments, the clones were blinded by their programming and had no emotional attachment to their heinous actions, making them completely apathetic for a few crucial moments. The end of the Jedi. As Order 66 was being carried out across the galaxy, Anakin Skywalker and his battalion of the 501st Legion were marching on the Jedi Temple directly, laying siege to the headquarters that the Jedi Order had long since called home. But if the clones had no emotional attachment to their generals, and they were corrupted into following their protocols, then why did the 501st not gun down Anakin Skywalker, identifying him as a Jedi? How did they know that Anakin was the Emperor's right hand, and why didn't they turn on him just as they did their comrades and the other respective Jedi generals across the galaxy? Well, today, students of the Force, we will answer that question. First though, according to our analytics, a lot of you guys that watch the channel haven't actually subscribed yet, so if you've been enjoying the daily Star Wars content, Force crush that subscribe button. The key part of this explanation is in the exact timeline of events between Mace Windu's confrontation with the Chancellor in his chambers, the siege on the Jedi Temple, and the issuing of Order 66, which all happened in very close proximity timeline-wise. But the exact order of events is crucial and informed exactly how Palpatine issued Order 66. After being defeated and disfigured by Windu, Palpatine and Anakin conspire to finally kill the prominent Jedi Master, and it's at this point where Anakin is fully under Palpatine's manipulation and complete control. Anakin kneels before his new master and is finally given the Sith moniker of Darth Vader, solidifying his new allegiance to Palpatine and his breakaway from the Jedi Order once and for all. What's important to note about Order 66, however, is that it was not issued to all the clone troopers at once, and there was not a system of issuing the order to all active clones, at least not that we see Palpatine using in this key moment. Palpatine addresses several clone commanders by name, indicating that he is making several calls to all clone commanders who are active on the battlefield one at a time, and choosing exact spots where he issues Order 66, and he is taking the time to reach out to clone battalions one by one. Or at least this is how he begins ordering it. By this point, however, he knows that Anakin is firmly on his side, in the side of darkness, and he is no longer a Jedi Knight who needs to be executed. While the clones themselves might not have known this outright, Palpatine did not reach out to Anakin's branch of the 501st, and therefore, his splinter of the battalion was not under the effects of Order 66 to begin with. On Mandalore, key members of the 501st Legion, including Rex and Jesse, were assisting Ahsoka Tano, and while Palpatine reached out to this portion of the 501st, which we see after Maul had been defeated, it is possible that Order 66 may not have been issued to Anakin's faction of the 501st. However, we believe that there is a better explanation and a better theory as to exactly why Anakin was not targeted for Order 66. It could be that directly within the clone programming, Darth Sidious had the ability to omit certain Jedi and then add additional Force wielders into Order 66, and this is something that he likely did do.
The reason we know this is mainly based off of Star Wars The Clone Wars Season 7. The two characters in question here are Darth Maul and Ahsoka Tano. Ahsoka Tano at this point in time is now no longer formally a Jedi Knight, as she decided to leave the Order after being framed for the crimes of Barriss Offee. Many people have even pointed out that her Jedi braid was even taken from her as she formally left the Order, even though she was absolved of all of her crimes. When Order 66 is initiated though, Ahsoka Tano is directly targeted by the 501st Legion, meaning that the clones did have some inclination to hunt down Ahsoka Tano even though she was formally no longer a Jedi General. In the specific text of Order 66 though, it does state that it specifically targets Jedi, so why is this? Not to mention that Darth Maul is even targeted himself. Darth Maul has no affiliation with the Jedi Order at all. He is a fully formed Sith Lord and a fallen Sith Lord. So why was Darth Maul targeted? The explanation that we believe is that Darth Sidious, who we know for a fact is the only individual in the entirety of the Star Wars galaxy capable of issuing Order 66, was also likely the only person that was able to amend it, either adding individuals to the list or taking them off. Earlier in the Clone Wars, many sources have pointed out that Tup does not target Anakin Skywalker as a result of Order 66, despite him being highly aggressive towards other Jedi Masters. This indicates that even several months before Order 66 was issued and the inhibitor chip malfunctioned within Tup, that Anakin Skywalker was not a target. So why is this? Well, it all leads into ultimately the grand plan of Darth Sidious. Anakin Skywalker was always meant to be the apprentice to Lord Sidious, as he wanted to form a dyad in the Force between the two of them. We know that Palpatine of course took great interest in the career of Anakin Skywalker ever since he discovered the presence of a Chosen One, and he always wanted to corrupt and turn Anakin Skywalker to the dark side, with this being one of his primary goals as a Dark Lord of the Sith, as even when he took on Dooku as an apprentice. Dooku was always a placeholder, as he would reveal in several novels as well as comics. Anakin Skywalker was the true prize, and Palpatine did not want this prize damaged during Order 66 at all. Perhaps even if Anakin had not fully turned to the dark side yet as of Order 66. He wanted to give himself another opportunity to potentially turn Anakin before the clones turned on Anakin themselves. We know that Darth Sidious even had an eye on Anakin Skywalker during his birth, and that he took great interest in the child, possibly far before the Jedi and Qui-Gon Jinn ever discovered him on Tatooine. Essentially then, what this means is that the programming for Order 66 was never meant to target Anakin, and we also know that Darth Sidious amended this to target Darth Maul, who had become a brand new viable threat that survived his injuries, meaning that if Darth Sidious needed to, he could actually reverse the order for the clones to target Anakin if Anakin refused to turn to the dark side as Palpatine wished. And this does basically indicate and confirm that there was some sort of wiggle room within the clone order, and the order for the clone troopers to turn on the Jedi. But it is interesting to note that as of the time of Revenge of the Sith, Darth Sidious bet on the fact that he was able to turn Anakin, and was confident that he would eventually turn to the dark side due to his disillusionment with the Jedi Order, the Jedi never trusting Anakin, and Palpatine's arrogance. Arrogance though, in this case, that was not unfounded, as he was ultimately completely correct. Anakin Skywalker did turn, and Darth Sidious never had to amend the Order 66 issue, targeting every single Jedi, Maul, Ahsoka, but not Anakin Skywalker. It's also interesting to note that Order 66 was likely amended to not target the Inquisitors, such as the Grand Inquisitor, who had already turned to the dark side during Order 66, as well as the Jedi survivors of Order 66 that would embrace the dark side of the Force and would become Inquisitors. Order 66 had to be initiated again by a Jedi Padawan in the Darth Vader comic book series that forced them to target the Inquisitors, but it is completely possible that Palpatine was able to remove at least some clone troopers' orders from the Inquisitors as well, and that is why the Inquisitors are not targeted by the clones outright. But anyway, my friends, what are your thoughts on this explanation? And do you think that this makes the most viable sense why Anakin, and even some Inquisitors, were not targeted during Order 66? Do you believe that Anakin Skywalker was omitted? And do you believe it was always Darth Sidious's plan for Anakin to be left out of Order 66? As always, my friends, thank you so much for watching, may the Force be with you, and have a great day. Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker have perhaps one of the most iconic friendships and brotherly bonds from across the entirety of Star Wars, sharing combat experiences across the duration of the Clone Wars, and bonding over the common experiences that shaped their formations into renowned Jedi Knights and warriors for the Republic. Though they would grow to become two of the most recognizable Knights of the Order, and their bond was nigh unbreakable before the rise of the Empire, is it possible that this bond actually played a very distinct role in the collapse of the Republic, and specifically, how it differed from most master and apprentice relationships, and contributed to Anakin Skywalker's fall to the dark side? Well, stick with us, weary travelers of the galaxy, as today we'll be discussing just how the relationship between Obi-Wan and Anakin was different from the traditional relationship that a Jedi Master and an apprentice shared with one another, and how this might have ultimately led to the downfall of the Jedi Order as a whole, despite how strong the bond seemed. The most important aspect of the standard relationship between a master and their apprentice to remember is that this was a mentorship wherein a Padawan would learn the necessary lessons to be inducted into knighthood from their master. There was a very distinct hierarchy between the two Jedi, with the master giving lessons and directives while showing the Padawan the ropes of what it meant to be a true Jedi Knight. And this came primarily from one of the most powerful teaching tools in existence, experience. This, however, was not the case for Obi-Wan and Anakin for a few reasons, primarily because of their proximity in age, as Anakin was incredibly old by the standards of a Jedi youngling, and began his training almost immediately after the death of Qui-Gon Jinn when the Jedi Council reverted their decision not to train him, at the age of 8, when the typical age to begin training for a Jedi is very, very young, not even a year old in fact, as the Jedi would claim the Force sensitives throughout the galaxy, believing that they were called for a higher purpose. Obi-Wan, however, was only just knighted after confronting Darth Maul and defeating him in combat, foregoing the Jedi trials and being promoted immediately to knighthood with no prior experience as a Jedi Knight before taking on a Padawan of his own, something that is not unheard of throughout Star Wars but something that is uncommon. This informational gap between Obi-Wan's experience and Anakin's maturity meant that they both felt out the trials of being a master and an apprentice combination together, learning the same lessons as they went on growing with one another, instead of the master being a firm guiding hand as a seasoned warrior of the Jedi Order. Obi-Wan and Anakin were very much each other's teachers. Obi-Wan failed far more often than veteran masters, simply because he lacked the experience and worldly knowledge of what it meant to be a fully fledged Jedi Knight, seeing as he had only graduated to knighthood very shortly before being assigned a Padawan, and the bond that arose because of this was more in tune with a brotherhood rather than a teacher and a student relationship. This is on full display throughout the course of the Clone Wars, as Anakin rises rapidly through the ranks to become the youngest Jedi to ever hold a seat on the Jedi Council, and basks in the glow of his own potential, not to mention being knighted himself over the course of the Clone War. Throughout the course of Attack of the Clones and beyond, we can already see the holes in Obi-Wan's teachings, as we see some of the red flags that a seasoned master would have addressed far earlier in the training process. In Attack of the Clones, we see how Anakin regards himself, and how he believes he can grow to become one of the most powerful Jedi Knights in the Order. This is a fundamental belief that revolves around Anakin gaining more and more power, which is an incredibly dangerous dark side interpretation that should have been addressed by Obi-Wan long ago, as a Jedi should not seek power inherently, wherein Anakin seemed to seek power almost instinctively. In Attack of the Clones, we see how Anakin regards himself, and how he believes he can grow to become one of the most powerful Jedi Knights in the entire Order, and potentially even the Order's existence. Yet this ideal continues to flourish within Anakin's mind, and this thirst for power in tandem with the desire to save Padme are ultimately two of the largest driving factors that pushed him into the hands of Palpatine. We also see Anakin's propensity to disobey and incite conflict with his master, which Obi-Wan allows to happen, as he sees Anakin as more of a peer than his student. In most relationships, this kind of willingness to behave with brash arrogance would have been quashed nearly immediately, but seeing as Obi-Wan had never taken an apprentice before, he was not versed in disciplining his students as wiser masters would have been, which again is why many believe Anakin would have never turned to the dark side if Qui-Gon Jinn was not killed by Maul on Naboo. This brotherhood mentality allowed Anakin to see him as well as his master as equals, allowing him to get away with far more than would have commonly been allowed for many within the Order, and acting with the same brash recklessness throughout the Clone War. While Obi-Wan has reprimanded Anakin on numerous occasions, he has never had the authority of distinct superiority for these scoldings to hold any significant weight over Anakin. Obi-Wan is a powerful Jedi Knight, but he is not the chosen one,
and Anakin elevated himself within the Order, but more importantly, within his own mind, believing that he was even the superior to his master. And it was only a matter of time before Anakin repeated the same behavior that Obi-Wan would ultimately come to accept from his Padawan. The lapse in his teaching ability meant that Obi-Wan made mistakes, and while he learned from them, his first apprentice being the Chosen One meant that the consequences of his inexperience and failures held far more weight than any other master might have had in their shortcomings. If Obi-Wan had trained a previous Padawan, then he would have had the experience necessary to ensure that his relationship with Anakin allowed him to teach the Chosen One in a proper fashion, which is why he was so much more successful in training Luke over the course of the original trilogy than he was when training Anakin. He saw the mistakes that he made the first time around when training a Padawan and implemented these lessons into the next Padawan learner, again that being Luke. He trained Luke with far more confidence and self-assuredness, allowing Luke to grow into the Jedi Knight who would ultimately topple the regime of the Empire and create a new Jedi Order that was able to learn from the mistakes of the past. He taught Luke how to properly be in tune with his emotions as well as his senses, teaching him the ways of the Force while pulling on all of the prior experience that he had throughout the course of the prequel era. He never emphasized power with Luke or his potential to grow into one of the strongest Jedi Knights in the history of the Order, as he did with Anakin, feeding the young boy's arrogance. And instead, he taught Luke about the responsibilities associated with the Force and how the Jedi Knights of old were meant to be servants of the Force and the galaxy as a whole. This relationship of a clear mentor training a mentee should have been the relationship that Obi-Wan and Anakin had throughout the Clone Wars in order to ensure that Anakin had proper guidance, though Obi-Wan simply lacked the experience and the knowledge to know any better. While Obi-Wan is not at fault for losing his apprentice to the dark side, there were factors at play, especially regarding his inexperience as a master, that led to the eventual fall of his friend and brother. I want to make it clear that skill-wise, Obi-Wan Kenobi did not lack in any fashion as a Jedi Master. It was simply his relationship to Anakin that needed work. This closeness and willingness to butt heads with one another is what led to the duo having routine conflicts that led to Anakin believing his master was just as naive as himself at times, and could be disobeyed without consequence. Luke, however, never thought that he knew better than Obi-Wan throughout the course of their training, and took his teachings as a student and not as a friend who had the capacity to argue back and deviate from his master's lessons. While this bond between Obi-Wan and the Elder Skywalker helped them in battle and allowed them to work together far more closely than some masters and apprentices, the shortcomings of this relationship resulted in the emotional instability of Anakin and a lack of proper, stern guidance. But anyway, my friends, what do you think of this idea? Do you believe this relationship was one of the main reasons that Anakin fell to the dark side? And what do you think Obi-Wan could have done differently in order to prevent this? We would love to hear your thoughts and interpretations on this in the comments down below. Thank you as always so much for watching, may the Force be with you, and I hope to catch you in the next video. Anakin Skywalker is one of the greatest swordsmen that Star Wars has ever seen, and one of the greatest prodigies of a lightsaber in all of the Star Wars timeline. Some Jedi considered him on the same level as Mace Windu, after he defeated Dooku in Revenge of the Sith in single combat, as many of the Jedi considered Dooku and Windu as equals. Anakin Skywalker without a doubt is one of the greatest swordsmen who has ever been a part of the Jedi Order, the Chosen One. As the Clone Wars led him to the furthest reaches of the Republic and the Separatist territories, he was able to overcome some incredibly powerful enemies and situations. While his master chose negotiation and defense as a primary approach to conflict, and Dooku elected to take a far more elegant approach to lightsaber combat, what did Anakin primarily use in terms of confrontation? What was Anakin's chosen lightsaber style and method of combat, and exactly how did he use it to become one of the most dangerous Jedi Knights of his generation and of all time, in both terms of his combat prowess as well as sheer strength? Well, today, we will answer that question as we break down and analyze the lightsaber combat style of Anakin Skywalker. Anakin's chosen style revolved primarily around the use of Form 5, otherwise known as the Gem So, which was one of the most aggressive forms of lightsaber combat out of the 7. Gem So was first pioneered by Sarisu veterans who had mastered the art of defense fully, but eventually grew weary of a Sarisu user's tendency to prolong a fight instead of finishing it as quickly as possible, viewing this as a major weakness.
They agreed that Form 3 Surisu was the strongest defensive form that they had created, but they also reached a consensus that it lacked offensive capabilities overall, and a Jedi did not have to extend a fight until an opponent wore themselves down in order to conquer them. Instead, they sought to create their own attacks and offensive maneuvers to outweigh the weaknesses of both Form 3 as well as Form 4. Form 4 being very acrobatic and offensive minded as well, but lacking many power strikes and a firm foundation. Form 5 though combined the ability to end a fight as early as possible instead of waiting for a time to strike with the defensive capabilities that Form 4 lacked. It should be noted that during Attack of the Clones, Anakin Skywalker's preferred lightsaber style was actually Form 4 Ataru, as he used his strength in the Force as well as his youth to perform great acrobatics. However, as the Clone Wars progressed, Anakin discovered that Form 4 was not enough. It should also be noted that initially, Form 4 was also the form that was originally practiced by Obi-Wan Kenobi and was mainly used by Qui-Gon Jinn, so it makes sense that this is the form that Anakin Skywalker would start with. However, after being defeated by Dooku, Anakin realized that he needed more, so he turned to the dueling-centric variant of Form 5, Jem-So. Jem-So was one of the most aggressive forms known to the Jedi Order, allowing a Jedi to jump into a confrontation and end it swiftly, while also maintaining a balanced defense. Form 5 style preached strong defense with an immediate counterattack, taking advantage of when an opponent's defenses was the weakest and continuing to wear them down over the course of a duel, which was more adept at overwhelming an opponent than Ataru for some avid users. This directly spoke to Anakin's style of combat and his ego as a young and brash Jedi Knight that had an affinity for tossing his own personal safety aside in favor of completing the mission. Anakin was headstrong and arrogant and was unafraid to dive headfirst into any fight, leading him to embrace Form 5 and become the master of not defense, but offense. When compared to Surisu, it could be said that Surisu allowed an enemy to wear themselves down, while Jem-So took the offense and wore the enemy down for a Jedi. Since Anakin largely saw himself as invincible, he was able to develop into one of the most talented offensive combatants of his entire generation, including Masters and Jedi Council members, able to overpower and overwhelm opponents swiftly and end fights incredibly quickly. His chosen form also didn't require nearly as much finesse or energy as something like Form 4 did, which focused on acrobatic maneuvers and swift strikes. The pioneers of Form 5 enjoyed Ataru's ability to overwhelm quickly, but cited its severe lack of defensive capabilities as one of its fatal flaws. And this was in large part due to flashy, broad motions over tight, controlled maneuvers. Ataru, which was mastered by the likes of Yoda and Qui-Gon Jinn, was similarly meant to overwhelm an opponent and bring a quick end to any conflict. But this form required them to be fast and precise. They valued precision and speed, keeping an opponent's mind working on overdrive until they overpowered their defenses and defeated them utterly. This crippled their defensive capabilities, however, as they were so focused on offense. But Surisu was able to offer a strong defense by keeping an opponent controlled and keeping blade movements much shorter and well placed. Jem-So, however, preached the value of strength and brute force, tiring an opponent by being so physically demanding that they simply lost the strength to fight. This was Anakin Skywalker. This, combined with the aggressive nature of Form 4, made Anakin nearly unstoppable in lightsaber combat. However, what made Anakin Skywalker truly dangerous as a lightsaber combatant was that he not only mastered Jem-So, but he improved it. It has been stated that the major weakness of Jem-So is a lack of mobility, something that Ataru and Surisu are actually quite good at. This is why Anakin had such a hard time against somebody like Dooku, who used Form 2 Makashi. He was so focused on breaking through him that the second that Dooku outmaneuvered him ever so slightly and tagged him with his lightsaber with finesse and precision, the duel was lost. Therefore, Anakin decided that he needed to make some tweaks to Form 5. That is where Anakin's former use of Ataru comes into play, as Anakin's lightsaber form has been described as mainly Jem-So, the more aggressive variant of Form 5, smashing through an opponent. But because of simply Anakin's stamina, skill in the Force, and physical power, he was able to implement the greatest parts of Ataru, and therefore, Anakin Skywalker's version of Jem-So was far more mobile than any other that used the form. This is ultimately how Anakin finally was able to defeat Dooku,
who had previously been the superior lightsaber combatant. He paired the aggression of Ataru with the defense of Sarisu and implemented his own strength in Form 5 to create the style that allowed him to be virtually unstoppable. For the duration of their relationship, Dooku's use of Makashi allowed him to capitalize on Anakin's aggression, redirecting it and taking advantage of Anakin's blind fury. Redirecting an attack is also a key attribute of Makashi. Dooku was able to use Anakin's hubris and overconfidence against him, maintaining his composure until he was ultimately able to subdue Anakin. After Anakin changed his form yet again and grew more powerful, becoming far more mobile, he was finally able to keep Dooku on the defensive for long enough to ultimately overpower the aging Sith Lord, and keep control of Gemso long enough and mobile enough to finally strike down his greatest teacher and enemy. We can see in the flashback in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series that Anakin is beginning to toy with the likes of Gemso in Form 5, as he's highly aggressive and not very acrobatic at all, meaning that this is likely when Anakin began to grow fascinated with the form. It should also be stated that in Revenge of the Sith, in his duel with Obi-Wan Kenobi, Anakin Skywalker is by far and away the superior lightsaber duelist. However, he becomes frustrated when he cannot break through the defenses of his master in Obi-Wan Kenobi, and is therefore led into a maneuver that he was not ready for and led to his ultimate defeat. This does not mean though that Obi-Wan was better than Anakin. As I have stated before, Anakin Skywalker smashed through his opponents with precision and brute strength. Not only was he inherently better as a lightsaber duelist than nearly all of his opponents, but he was also far physically stronger. Anakin Skywalker in terms of skill with the blade is absolutely on par with Mace Windu during the events of Revenge of the Sith. He's one of the greatest lightsaber duelists that have ever lived, one of the most domineering, aggressive, fearsome, and consistent duelists. However, it's Obi-Wan's familiarity that ultimately led to Anakin being defeated. In the end though, the skill of Gemso as perfected by Anakin Skywalker should not be questioned in the slightest. Anakin was a domineering force of nature that could break down the defenses and offenses of nearly any opponent. He was truly a prodigy with the blade, and he is one of the greatest lightsaber duelists that we will ever see in the myth of Star Wars. As always, students of the Force, thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts on Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber form in the comments down below. And as always, may the Force be with you, and have a great day. Darth Vader's slow corruption by the dark side and his descent into a vengeful, hatred force forged him into perhaps the single most dangerous Imperial enforcer in history. Not to mention, perhaps one of the single most powerful Sith Lords that have ever lived. Being forced to watch a famed Jedi war general and hero of the Republic slip into anger and resentment led many of his closest friends into isolation, including deep guilt and utter regret as Anakin slowly slipped away from existence, only replaced by Lord Vader. Though he ultimately became a cold, heartless machine that butchered anything in his path, for the earliest days of his career, there was still a tremendous amount of internal conflict brewing within the newly deemed Dark Lord of the Sith. Perhaps one of Anakin's most heinous acts, and the moment that he truly solidified that Anakin Skywalker had truly surrendered himself to the dark side, was slaughtering the defenseless youngling children in the council chambers. Vader's murder of the defenseless children who cowered in fear from the events of Order 66 continually serves as one of his defining moments of a character, and one of the darkest points in his life, not to mention in all of Star Wars lore. This is the defining moment where Anakin no longer exists, and now there is only Vader. This moment served as the definitive rebirth of Vader, and despite having neither his iconic suit nor the Crimson Blade, Anakin's transformation into Darth Vader was officially complete. But this raises the substantial question: what was going on in Anakin's head? And what was going on in his head leading up to this moment? Perhaps the most crucial moment of Anakin's entire life. What were Vader's primary thoughts upon entering the council chambers? And most importantly, what was his justification for killing defenseless children? And was there any semblance of Anakin left behind in this moment? Well, today, students of the Force, let's delve into how Vader was able to justify his actions on that fateful day. Before entering the council chambers, he wrestled with the uncertainty and questioned his loyalty to the dark side for just a few brief moments, ultimately coming to terms with his duty by claiming that the Jedi Jedi had already stripped the younglings of their free lives. These moments become quite crucial in the newest episode of Kenobi. In order to bury the consciousness of Anakin Skywalker, he had to create a new story and a way to justify his actions. He reframed the narrative in a way that suited his own sense of responsibility and morality, and ultimately even came to the conclusion that he would be doing these younglings a favor by ending their sufferings at the hands of the Jedi. From this point on, there will be spoilers in this video for episode 5 of Obi-Wan. It is these crucial moments, these last moments of Anakin Skywalker that we get to witness briefly in Obi-Wan Kenobi that represents the birth of the third sister. But we will be covering more topics about Reva, her survival, and the history of the Inquisitors in future videos. Today though, we will be focusing solely on Anakin's thoughts, and the fact that he believed that he was freeing these young children. In this moment, the younglings were no longer individuals, nor were they children in Vader's view, but they were simply suffering victims who he was putting out of their misery as an act of mercy. Vader told himself that once they had been indoctrinated into the Jedi Order, they were beyond saving, and they were doomed to endure a lifetime of suffering just at a different hand. Therefore, Vader was setting them free entirely. This was the justification that Vader would live with for the duration of his life, and once his divide from Anakin deepened, he would eventually come to see the two as entirely separate beings. Anakin Skywalker is dead. This allowed him to distance himself from the intimacy of the atrocity and put the blame on Anakin, which is actually a crucial part of the Vader character. The fact that he blames this moment on Anakin and not himself. At the beginning of his transformation, his viewpoint was drastically different, while the chaos and calamity of Order 66 and the siege of the Jedi Temple led to this moment being one of many distinct atrocities that Vader would commit. The expanded material gives us a much deeper insight into not only this moment, but the larger reaching ramifications that it had on both Vader's psyche immediately following, and his development into one of the most formidable Sith Lords in the history of the galaxy, as his relationship with this moment does undergo a transformation. In the comic line Darth Vader 7, the story of Vader's early days, his rise and solidification into the fold of the dark side, and his allegiance to the Emperor are explored in much more detail. We are able to see how this event took its toll on the Dark Lord from an internal perspective, with Anakin's thoughts spelled out. In the very first panel of this issue, we see that Vader is kneeling before his new master, who asks him if he killed all of the Jedi, even the younglings, to which Vader simply replies, all of them. Though it's Anakin's face that we see, the character is the earliest iteration of Darth Vader, who is defeating the last of Skywalker's heroic nature. As the hope of his redemption and tied to the light dwindles, he sinks further into the grip of Sidious and the clutches of the Empire out of sheer desperation and utter defeat. Not to mention fear, as now there is no turning back. But his mind wouldn't let go of the younglings so easily. Anakin's mind still lingered, if ever so slightly, and it would not let Vader forget. We are able to see how this event haunted him long after the younglings were all dead, and we can see this evidence much later in the same comic book series. The comic goes into detail about the slaughter of the Separatist leadership on Mustafar, the events that would directly lead to the climactic battle between Obi-Wan and the recently awakened Lord Vader. The same battle, of course, in which Vader would be crippled and confined to his tomb of a combat suit. In Revenge of the Sith, we saw the relentless murder of Newt Gunray and his associates, but the comic sheds more light on this formative event in Vader's life, and how again Vader's mind perceived this moment. In the comic, we see that Vader's mind is still preoccupied with the younglings, and he is still grappling with his actions to kill them. His guilt and his regret plague him as he slaughters the Separatist leadership, but at this point, it is understood that he is too far gone, and there is no redemption for the lost Skywalker. There is only the dark side, there is only Sidious, and at this point, there is only Padme's life. It's highly likely that this lust of rage and violence helped to deepen his connection with the dark side itself, and in doing so, would cause him to feel such a surge of immense power, reinforcing the idea that he needed the dark side, and that he needed it in order to save Padme, and that it would provide him the necessary strength in order to do so. After all, he had only freed the younglings from their suffering, but in doing so, he would be able to save his wife from certain death. The youngling's fate had been decided. At least this though, at least he had Padme in the end. At least he could still be Anakin, maybe. Wrestling with his guilt and self-loathing would have augmented his hatred and his suffering, making him more powerful, both of which would have strengthened his connection with the dark side and allowed him to expand the extent of his newfound power. Even if Anakin wanted to turn back, Vader was too far gone, and there was no hope for redemption within his very mind. Vader understood the weight of his actions and knew full well that redemption was likely far beyond him. He had already effectively killed Mace Windu and a myriad of other Jedi, as well as of course the younglings that would not leave his mind, as well as played a direct hand in the collapse of the entirety of the Galactic Republic that he had sworn to serve and protect at all costs. Even if he had wanted to turn back, there was nothing to turn back to, as the remains of his old life were simply the barren, ashen remains of Coruscant and the Jedi Temple. There was no more council, nor were there a Jedi Order to return to. The Senate was in shambles, and the only power that remained was the power that Palpatine decided, the Galactic Empire. Beyond his guilt though, something else seemed to flow within Vader's mind. He found an odd sense of uneasy confidence that lay within his new powers, and though he was sacrificing his loved ones, his fractured mental state, and his life, the deepened connection with the dark side gave him the confidence that he could truly save Padme from death. This reassurance of this feeling of immortality likely showed him some semblance of light at the end of the dark tunnel, some silver lining that was never there, some safety or happiness in the idea that at the very least, he could live out the remainder of his life with Padme and his child by his side. For the time being, this helped Anakin, or rather Vader, justify his actions, including the deaths of the younglings that were still within his mind, and Vader was able to carry this philosophy with him up until Padme's eventual death as well. Only after this did his mind truly begin to splinter as he began to separate Anakin and Vader into two separate entities, two different people, eventually even addressing Anakin as an entirely separate person later on in Vader's life. As his disconnect from his past life worsened, he began to distance himself from the events of that fateful day. But in the moment, Vader did in fact not only have his doubts, but he came to grapple with the events on a highly personal level, even taking the burden to Mustafar and beyond, showing that the birth of the merciless tyrant may not have been fully formed, and that the light within the fallen Jedi likely still remained for a few more brief moments. In the end though, the light within Anakin himself, died with the younglings in that room. But anyway, students of the Force, what do you think of this insight into Vader's psyche and mental state during this crucial moment in Star Wars? Did you know that Darth Vader actually regretted killing the younglings? And what other events do you think took their mental toll on Vader? As always, students of the Force, thank you so much for watching. Hit that subscribe button, and may the Force be with you. Anakin Skywalker is widely regarded as one of the most powerful Jedi Knights in the history of the Order, and as a noble war hero throughout the Clone Wars, he brought with him a level of prestige and notoriety that was matched by very few. Though he would come to grow into a renowned idol within the Order, his childhood and upbringing within the Jedi Temple was far less merciful and far less than ideal. Though he had lived his life as a slave on Tatooine and had endured a number of traumas and tribulations at the hands of Watto and the environment in which he grew up, his life did not automatically get better upon arriving to the Jedi Temple. In fact, in some ways, it continued to take drastic hits on his mental and emotional state. So stick with us, weary travelers of the galaxy, and let's delve into some of the challenges that Anakin faced in his early life between arriving on Coruscant to the events of Attack of the Clones in Episode 2, and why living at the Jedi Temple was actually quite difficult for the young learner. Throughout the course of his training, there were a number of significant reasons why Anakin created a divide between himself and the rest of the Jedi younglings, and perhaps one of the strongest was due in large part to his dark past. Anakin was burdened with significantly more emotional baggage and severe trauma than the rest of his classmates were, which made it increasingly difficult for him to interact with them or form meaningful connections. Likewise, his peers elected to avoid him in return, sensing his disturbing and discomforting attitude about the world and view on the galaxy as a whole, as well as the entitlement that came from being dubbed the ever-elusive Chosen One. despite the only life he had ever known being wrought with pain and fear, as well as emotional and psychological torture. One of the other largest contributing factors was due to the drastic age disparity between him and the rest of his class, which resulted in Anakin immediately beginning to have trouble connecting with his peers, further worsening his already battered mental state. Having grown up with the connection with his mother, he would immediately have been an outcast, as the other Jedi initiates saw him largely as an entitled, self-absorbed child who also got to have a life that they did not, despite being enslaved. Jedi younglings were torn away from their families, and the memories of their loved ones quickly faded into obscurity, while the masters around them told them to harness their emotions, to behave humbly, and to embrace the honor of being a Jedi initiate, as the calling of the Jedi was considered one of the greatest privileges in the galaxy by many. This would most likely lead to an era of resentment, as the alleged Chosen One seemed to flaunt not only his title, but his life away from the Jedi Order that none of the initiates besides Anakin got to live. Though the bulk of his life was subject to enslavement, Anakin has admitted that among the pain, he did have good memories scattered throughout his childhood. He had genuine connections and friends, as well as his mother, and he would have likely recounted his advantages alongside Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, from winning his freedom in a pod race to destroying the blockade of Naboo, at the end of the Phantom Menace, of course. This is not to say that his life was easy or fun by any means, but it may very well be perceived that way by children who have an incredibly limited understanding of the inner workings of the galaxy outside of the Jedi Temple. These children were taken from infancy and reconditioned to assimilate into the Jedi Order, rapidly surrendering their memories and connections before they even had a chance to fully form them. Through these disparities, Anakin became thoroughly antisocial, avoiding interactions wherever possible, and typically branding himself as a loner, though he rose through the ranks of training remarkably fast when compared to the rest of the students. Anakin could pass some courses within mere months that would take other recruits an entire year to master, which further deepened the social divide between himself and the rest of the students of the Order. This led to a common practice of bullying and teasing for the young Chosen One, as the other children would mock Anakin for his slave past, as well as his unusually strong connection with the Force, which obviously stemmed from a place of jealousy, knowing that his points of sensitivity lie with his mother and the few bonds that he had on Tatooine, though this was not a one-way street. While the children were commonly at fault for bullying or teasing, the conflict was largely two-sided, with Anakin not only retaliating on multiple occasions, but inciting a number of conflicts with the students to whom he was the least cordial, and these feud carried on through the years. His social isolation would frequently pull Anakin into instigating conflict with the other students, as we learned that Anakin had unresolved pent-up aggression all the way back in Episode 1. We got a glimpse of Anakin's life on Tatooine, which frequently entailed him getting into physical altercations with other children in the village, a tendency which carried over to his life in the temple. Kids would often be armed with insults regarding both his past as a slave and his uncanny connection to the Force and ability to soar through the Jedi curriculum, which would exacerbate conflicts even further. This eventually drew the attention of the Jedi High Council, who were forced to step in on a number of occasions, and the most common mediator of these aggressive conflicts was none other than Obi-Wan Kenobi, who was concurrently developing incredible skills in the fields of negotiation, diplomacy, and de-escalation. This also allowed Anakin and Obi-Wan to develop a deeper personal connection early on in their training regiment, even after their shared experiences on Naboo and the bond that they felt through the mutual mourning of Qui-Gon Jinn, which further strengthened their brotherly bond that would later develop into a master and apprentice relationship later down the line. Nonetheless, Anakin Skywalker's childhood at the Jedi Temple was less than ideal, as many of the students outright hated the young Chosen One, and Anakin hated them in return. What's ironic about the relationships in both sides of the coin is that they both stemmed from places of jealousy for one another. The students were jealous of Anakin because of the fact that he got to live out segments of his life without being indoctrinated into the Jedi Order, and because of his incredible ability to touch the Force. And Anakin was jealous of the students because of the bonds that they formed with one another, and the connections that they shared with their masters. We have to remember that at this point in time, the young Skywalker had experienced so much loss, losing nearly everything, being stripped away from his home, his mother, all of his friends, and everything that he knew, to be placed in a strange situation where all of these other students had lived the entirety, or at least the majority, of their lives. But anyway, my friends, what do you think think of this detail of Anakin's early life after escaping from Tatooine? And did you know about these conflicts that he had with other younglings, and how do you think this influenced his growth into a fully fledged Jedi Knight? As always, my friends, thank you guys so much for watching the video. Hit that subscribe button, and I hope to see you in the next one.